And so first I wanted to start off with like this question, people are like, what are we trying to achieve if we want to move toward energy justice? And this definition from some scholars in the UK say that energy justice is an energy system that fairly disseminates both the benefits and cost of energy services. And this important point that it's representative and impartial in energy decision making, becoming a lot more interested in how do we engage citizens in the energy decision-making process. And so I think the GEM tool is one way to begin to do that. There are kind of four main principles of energy justice, starting with recognition justice. And that's really looking at what are the vulnerabilities of different populations, what are the needs if we want to be more equitable in our energy system, and how do we approach people from a place of respect to really get people on board to think about energy decision making. Distributional justice, which the GEM tool will help explain that and explore that. So looking at disparities across income groups, differences in energy prices and affordability. And one main challenge that we have is differences in energy efficiency, which leads to higher energy burdens. Procedural justice is when we've recognized, we've looked at the disparities distributionally. Now, how do we get people engaged in the process? And so things like information access, understanding what the decision-making process is, and then what are your legal rights as an energy user, as a municipality, as a utility, and then finally corrective justice. This is where we solve these problems of energy injustices. And so things like equity-based rates, solar for all programs, and the idea behind energy democracy. I like to say we're living in this United States of energy insecurity. We all became familiar with what happened in Texas a few months ago. How does the largest energy producing state in our country fail so miserably, right? People in their homes freezing, high energy bills after the crisis. And then we saw that there were racial and income disparities in who was restored earlier than later. We know the pandemic is causing massive affordability issues, people being unemployed, people spending more time at home. And so what happens with all these massive bills that people are piling up? And then energy insecurity can be deadly. I usually share stories from different locations, but this is a story from New Jersey of some miscommunication in a utility company, a grandmother coming home from the hospital with a life-saving device. Her family paid her past due utility bills, but the disconnect notice team wasn't informed by the billing team, and then she actually passed away because her utilities were turned off. And so this idea of energy insecurity, Diana Hernandez at Columbia University defines it as an inability to adequately meet household energy needs. And this includes physical, economic, and behavioral dimensions. And energy insecurity can actually lead to or exacerbate adverse health issues. And so the residential energy consumption survey showed us that these disparities exist across racial groups. 1 in 5 households forego basic necessities like food or medicine to pay their energy bills. 14% of households have received disconnect notices, and 11% of households actually keep their homes at unhealthy temperatures, whether too hot or too cold. And you can see from this survey, which is data from 2015, that more than half of Black households experience energy insecurity, compared to 31% across the country. And I just wanted to show this because I know we have people from various locations. Energy insecurity is not, constant across the country. We're looking at 37 million households that experienced energy insecurity in 2015. And you can see how that varies across different regions of the country. In the South, experiencing 35% of households in the South. And we know that the pandemic has exacerbated, everything really, right? And so we see worsened disparities when it comes to energy insecurity with people living in inefficient housing, people that have medical devices, and Hispanic and Black households have had worse experiences with energy insecurity during the pandemic. And so under this large umbrella of energy justice, there is the issue of energy insecurity, which is temporal, so you can come in and out of energy insecurity. You can have chronic energy insecurity. But one of the challenges is how do we measure that? And so one element of measuring that is the energy burden. And so energy burden is defined as the percentage of your gross household income that's spent on energy costs. Most people look at residential electricity and heating. There are some folks that bring in water utilities, other people are bringing in transportation costs, but for the conversation I'm having, I'm just looking at electricity and heating. Greater than 6% of your income going to energy costs is considered a high energy burden. 10%, the UK uses that as their definition of fuel poverty. And here in the US, people say that's severe energy burden if you spend more than 10%. And we've recognized this issue since the 70s. So we have a large, many of you may be aware of, national energy assistance program called the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. And I just wanted to show, how much money we put into this issue of energy affordability. $3.74 billion in fiscal year 2020, an additional $900 million supplement in the CARES Act, and $4.5 billion in the American Rescue Plan. And there's some local and state action around affordability and energy burden. Michigan, we're doing a pilot to set a percent of income in our energy rates. So it'll be interesting to see what the results are from that. Again, it should be no surprise, and it's unfortunate that there are racial disparities in energy burdens, with Black households experiencing 43% higher energy burdens, Hispanic households 20% higher, and Native households 45% higher. And this, again, is related to public health. We published a study earlier this year where we wanted to see in counties across the US, was there some relationship between energy burden and experiences of poor public health? And what we found was as energy burden increased in counties, that there was an average 240 more premature deaths per 100,000 people. Each unit increase in energy burden increased 7% of county residents that reported that they had fair or poor health. And energy burden was also related to a 5-year decrease in average life expectancy. And so again, this is not causality, but this is just a relationship between an experience of energy burden and the public health in our US counties. And so there are a lot of policy implications for this. One could be, what if our doctors began prescribing energy efficiency or improved energy affordability as a measure to improve public health? So I want to end on hopefully what you all are about to start talking about with the GEM tool, and use Detroit as an example. And you may see some Detroit data or Atlanta data later, but just to kind of frame this idea of, why is it important to start looking at this stuff geographically? A good friend of mine, Shalonda Baker, who is the new Deputy Director of Energy Justice at DOE, recently released her book, Revolutionary Power. And this quote from the book really stood out to me, and I'll show you why. The energy system routinely sacrifices brown, Black, and Indigenous bodies to keep the lights on for the majority. And so this is a map of kind of the Detroit Metro, 3 counties in Detroit, Wayne County, Oakland County, and Macomb County. And what you see on the left-hand side is electricity consumption. So the red areas are the highest areas of electricity consumption. Yellow are the lowest areas of consumption. So red areas, people consume more energy. Yellow areas, people consume less. And you'll see down at the bottom, I have circled a power plant cluster. So this is 1 coal plant, 2 natural gas plants. So you can see what's happening when it comes to electricity consumption. Communities that are consuming the least amount of energy are hosting dirty power plants, and communities that are benefiting from that generation are located out in the suburbs without those plants. On the right-hand side, you see the concentration of people of color. Detroit is a majority minority city. That circle there is where those power plants are. So you can see large percentage of populations of color, and just look at the difference between those 2 maps. We see the same thing when we look at other vulnerabilities such as poverty, less education, medium household income, renters, linguistic isolation, and elderly or youth. So again, communities that are very vulnerable, hosting the hosting the burden of our energy system, while less vulnerable communities get the benefit. And then finally, this is a map of electricity burden, which is a little different than what you'll be seeing in the GEM tool, but again, probably the same spatial areas. And so again, people with really high unaffordability for electricity, bearing the burden of the generation of that electricity, but not even being able to affordably benefit from it. So that's why this is really important. And so if you want to reach out to me, here's my contact. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to present to you all today. And I really hope you have a great session as you dig into the GEM tool.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reames. It's such a privilege to have you here. We had a couple questions in the chat, and I want to encourage other people just to put some questions in the chat, or if you know how to use that little raise your hand tool in Zoom, you can do that, or you can just unmute and talk if that's easiest for you. I think we just have a few minutes here to get into some of these questions. And I think one of them that came up was just sort of a quick question on that UK fuel poverty definition. Does that include vehicle gas tanks? There was a question about that.
Yeah, so the original fuel poverty calculation is just residential electricity and heating. There is also a movement on transport poverty. And so the UK has gone from this kind of basic 10% to now they have a measure called low income, high costs. Because what they were finding was that people live in really large homes that use a lot of energy, and they were still paying 10% of their income, but because they were wealthy, they could afford it. And so, looking at, people who have low incomes, but really high costs are relative to their income and not just a flat 10%.
Thank you. I have a sort of a really broad question for you that's probably like another presentation or a couple of presentations, but like a lot of the folks that are here as part of this community of practice they work as policy managers, sustainability directors in city government, and they're advancing climate policy, right? And so one of the questions that we have is like, how do we advance policies that reduce carbon emissions while also trying to do something about the inequities of energy injustice or a disproportionate energy burdens felt by communities of color and others? And I'm just wondering, again, I know it's like it could be a thesis, but I'm just wondering if there are some particular things or some advice that you would give to climate policymakers about how to think about energy burden and how to pull that into the policies and strategies they're designing.
Yeah, this is one of the main challenges with like the energy efficiency resource standards, right? The goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which can be in conflict sometimes with focusing on low-income energy efficiency, because we know that low-income households on average consume less energy. So you don't get the bang for your buck on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But if we start thinking about focusing on energy affordability and low-income energy efficiency or energy equity from a climate mitigation, climate adaptation perspective and a resiliency, as temperatures change, it gets hotter, people are using more energy for AC. If they're using that less efficiently, then they're wasting energy and spending more money. And so if we think about it from an adaptation perspective, I think that's how we can get on board with rolling this into our climate plans.
Thanks so much. John, you had a question in the chat. You want to just come off mute, tell us who you are, kind of what you do, and then ask this question?
Sure. So question for you, Dr. Reames. My name is John Thigpen. I'm a climate advisor with the American Cities Climate Challenge in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we're very much looking at energy burden in Charlotte. Charlotte does not rank well in that category. And we actually submitted comments to the Utilities Commission with the help of Greenlink, among others, on this topic. And my question for you is, we're hearing a lot in the news about a push towards a $15 minimum wage. And I'm wondering, is there some downside to that with respect to energy burden? Could that potentially mask some of these environmental injustices? Is energy burden maybe not going to be as strong a metric to identify those disparities? I'll stop there.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I guess, a benefit would be if people are making more than they can afford, household energy costs, right? But I also often like to look at energy burden in relation to energy efficiency. And, so another metric I use is energy use intensity, the amount of energy you consume per square area of your home. And so the higher that number is, the less efficient you're using your energy relative to other homes that same size. And so I do think, starting to look at, instead of just one metric, if we look at a suite of equity metrics or metrics that could give us more insight into equity concerns, we can still push for energy justice in those areas.
Thank you. All right, we've got one more question in the chat, and I see Shai's raised her hand. We'll take those two, and then we're going to go over and look at the GEM tool. So Anna, do you want me to read your question? You want to come off chat and share your question about community solar? Sorry, come off mute.
Sure, I'd be happy to share it again. Hi, Dr. Reames, good to be connected. So I work with EcoWorks, and we are working in Detroit, doing a lot of low-income affordability measures around energy. And something that we run into is really this transition to clean energy. A just transition to clean energy requires solar, but that's really challenging, especially for renters in low-income communities. So I'm curious sort of what your take is on how these sort of energy justice measures are being thought about by utilities that might have a disincentive to encourage community solar, and maybe what levers we can pull to increase community solar capacity.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. The challenge we have here in Michigan with rooftop solar and even community solar. So in Michigan, community solar is viewed as utility-owned solar in a community. It could be the community where people are benefiting from it or not. But there is a push to increase the distributed energy generation cap in Michigan. It's like 1% of energy consumption now. And so we could see an expansion of rooftop solar opportunities here in the state. But there's also, our other large utility in the state is doing some really cool and innovative things with the state energy office, where they're providing blocks of solar to households that go through the weatherization assistance program. And so this kind of energy efficiency plus community solar opportunity. And I think if that pilot goes really well, we might see that be expanded. So stay tuned, Anna. And we can talk offline since you're here in Detroit also.
Yeah. Okay, Shai, do you want to come off of mute and ask your question, and then we'll move over to the demonstration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for opening up to questions, and thank you, Dr. Reames. It's great to hear you talk about this. This is a topic that we're diving into in Philly too. We started really focusing heavily on heat resilience, and then we realized we were missing this core conversation around like energy and like what it costs to run air conditioning. And then with conversations with residents, they, helped us know more that they're telling us that their homes are not holding their energy, right? So their homes are not energy efficient, just like you're saying. And we're really struggling with that because it's hard to get everyone to find the money to improve our homes. And so anyway, one of the things that I have been trying to find is this thing that you keep discussing, which is like, we can show the energy burden, but we also have to show the use. And the use has been really hard for us to capture. I know, like Matt's nodding, I was like, can we do use? And everybody was like, I don't know. Like, there are legal issues obviously with it. We would probably have to go through our utility company, but I saw it was so amazing that you guys had that, you had use, and it shows you exactly what residents probably already told you, and you probably already knew. And that's exactly what our residents are telling us too, that, we are having to pay more, but we're not using as much, right? We know it, but we can't prove it, right? So I just wanted to ask, like, could you share a little bit about your experience of what it took to get that energy consumption data and partners and how you did that?
Yeah, really quick, I'll tell a funny story. So when I was a PhD student, it was during the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act era. And so the utility was going to share, all of this data because they were putting in smart meters. but then my utility partner went silent and they didn't share the data. So I ended up having to create a model from the residential energy consumption survey. So doing some kind of, they call it small area estimation. So you take a larger data set at the state level, look at the characteristics that contribute to that, and then matching that with census data. So I can send you a paper that explains how we did that. But so really it's an estimate, right? So the map shows the median consumption at the census block level. So it's just an estimate, but I am working with our local utility now to do some spatial analysis. We have tax record data on the size of homes, and they're going to give us anonymous, so they're going to match it for us and give us anonymous consumption data. So we'll have use over square foot data. And so hopefully we get to see a little more about that. Yeah. But yeah, I think pushing the public service, public utility commissions to push the utilities to do that kind of stuff is definitely an effort that, a worthwhile effort that I always encourage people to take up. Because the more data we have, and protecting privacy is very important, but if we could do it, at zip code or census block or some level where we can start to identify inefficient areas, that would help.
We want to get to this demo, but I just saw this question, this kind of request for help in here from Ms. Lynn Godfrey. I wondered if you wanted to come off and just say a little bit. It sounds like you've got some money in Virginia and are looking for some people that might want to workshop some ideas about how to best spend that to address energy burden. And I don't think we can get deep into it now, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. We could kind of maybe huddle with you offline or connect Dr. Reames to your effort.
Yeah, that was just, we were talking, I think the question was about, how we could, solutions. And that was one of them. Virginia is the southernmost state in the RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Initiative on the East Coast. And just this quarter alone in the cap and trade auction, we garnered over $43 million. And I'm now a part of the community of practice. I'm with the Sierra Club of Virginia.
Oh,
and so we get ready to venture into a community that's similar to Detroit, a majority minority, pretty much an apartheid type of situation, actually. But this is new to us. It's a new initiative. So so moving forward, not today, but that is something that we would be seeking solutions for and thinking out of the box, how we can use this money. One of the state agencies that's administering the funds has developed a stakeholder group for that reason to figure out. So they do a weatherization program now, and I wanted to know, which is great. And most of the area that we will be servicing is single family homes. So that's just put out there that in the future, I'm new to the group. The Sierra Club, I think, is new to the group. As far as Virginia is concerned, and just moving forward, those would be some of the things that we would be workshopping to, that we would be seeking some solutions for.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. And I just put in email, and Amina's going to put her email out later for anybody that wants to connect just about, making sure you're in the community practice. We're glad to have you here. And maybe you could reach out to Mina, just drop her an email, or we'll reach out to you. Maybe we could set up a side conversation and workshop.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That on this call that are interested.
Yeah.
And it could be cool.
Yeah, that would be appreciated.
Help each other. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for all the great questions. And thanks so much again, Dr. Reames. I don't know. I think you got to run, or are you going to stay for a little bit? I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm going to watch the demo.
All right. Excellent. Good.
Yeah,
well, we're so thankful to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your slides and, being part of this little community. I'm going to turn it over to Yo and Matt now, who are just going to give us a little demonstration of how to look at energy burden with the GEM tool that you all have access to. And then we'll get in some small groups and kind of dig into your questions and have a little conversation around what we see in the tool. Yo, Matt?
Yeah, no pressure doing this in front of Dr. Reames and all of y'all. I think I'm a little bit nervous.
No, I love the tool, so I can't wait to see.
Yes, Dr. Reames was one of our reviewers for our energy burden methodology, for which we are very appreciative. So I hope he doesn't hate everything that I have to say just now. I'm just nervous about it. But I am going to go through this a little bit quickly because I know many of you have been in the tool and playing around, and I really want to save a lot of time for our small group breakouts when we can dive deeper into cities. But please feel free to let me know if I'm going too fast or anything like that. So I'm going to do one quick slide. Hopefully you guys can all see it. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining our GEM Community of Practice Utility Burden exercise. We're so excited to have you here. A little bit more about the Greenlink Equity Map. It's an online map designed to help cities visualize equity-related issues and how burdens are spread across neighborhoods. As cities work to incorporate social equity into climate policies and programs, a lot of cities and organizations have found that accessing equity data has been a major challenge for their city, for their communities, et cetera. And the Greenlink Equity Mapping platform actually provides about 20 different equity indicators to choose from at a neighborhood and census tract levels to assist cities, communities, and other local organizations to understand the current situations in their communities, provide critical data resources to build strong city-community partnerships, and build more equitable climate actions. And super shout out to our funders, Kresge Foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and Energy Foundation for helping fund the first build out of the GEM map and this community of practice. I really appreciate them enabling us to do this and hold this space. So GEM is really the locus of Greenlink's efforts to make democracy work better through more equitable processes. We found that there was a massive gap in data availability to inform climate and equity conversations. And we really felt like data could help cities, communities, and organizations really explore the questions of where are we now with equity indicators in the map? Why are we here? What forces led us here? What forces can change these outcomes? And how can we work together to get where we need to be? So answering these questions with data, hand in hand with community stories and lived experiences, will really help address some of the information gaps that cities and communities have and expose the interconnected nature of equity issues in our cities. And we really hope this will inform joint meaning making between cities and communities to progress towards participatory policy making, where we can build stronger climate and equity policies together. So I just said a lot in that intro. Matt, is there anything I missed or you wanted to add to that?
All good.
Awesome. Okay, in that case, I'm going to switch over to the equity map itself and walk you through a little bit about, we'll dig a little bit deeper into Detroit, if that's all right with everybody. So can you all see that equity map? So awesome, thank you. In the registration page, you can log in and through gem.equitymap.org. Somebody can drop that into your chat if you're a current user of GEM. So, and normally you can search for your city or county up in the search bar. So you can look at it by city, county, neighborhood, or area. And today we're just going to look at Detroit. So normally you can just do Detroit, Michigan, and it'll zoom you a little bit further into the city. And you can, but right now we're actually going to look at the whole of Wayne County. So I'm going to zoom us out just a little bit more so we can see the entirety of the county. This first view that you're taking a look at is an equity indicator. It is actually utility burden, but we have a whole list of equity indicators that you can look at in GEM. Like I mentioned, there are about 20. So we have several with utility burdens. We also have racial composition, asthma rates, health insurance, households with high housing burden costs, eviction rates, information about whether a community is more renter versus owner or single family versus multifamily. And we also have information around income stress and lack of internet access. Most of this energy burden data and other equity indicator data comes from about 2018. And there are full descriptions of the indicators and their sources listed at equitymap.org. So we can definitely give you the link for that if you're interested in digging into when and where is that data from. So for today, we're just going to start looking at utility burden at the neighborhood average indicator, which is what we're looking at right now. So I'm clicking the neighborhood average. And then like Dr. Reames said, utility burden is the percentage of how much people pay for their utility bills as a percentage of their average income. So for energy burden, we're specifically going to look at gas and electric burdens and not click on water, although you can look at water burdens as well if you want to. So taking a look at that, the drop-down menu will actually show you what the lowest levels of energy burden in the county is, which is about 0.055, which is very low. And then some of the maximum burdens around 30%. So that's incredibly high when Dr. Reames mentioned that severe energy burden or energy poverty is at that 10% and high energy burden is at that 6%, and nationally energy burden is only about 3 to 4%. So the fact that there are communities in Wayne County that have 30% energy burden is kind of insane when you think about it. So what you're looking at here in the map is that areas with lighter color have lower energy burdens. And you can see in this pop-up box on the right-hand side what the actual energy burdens in these communities are. So 3%, 4%, right around the national average in these southwest suburban areas. But as you head northeast, these energy burdens increase quickly to 8% above that high energy burden level. And then as you get closer into the heart of Detroit, it gets much higher into these levels of 20, 30%. So some of these census tracts are 22, 25% energy burdens. And you can actually zoom in much closer and look at it at the neighborhood level as well. I should mention that there is a legend key on the bottom right to help you navigate and show you what low, medium, and high looks like for the indicator. And it also helps provide a definition for each of these equity indicators as well. So let's see. Starting, I just lost track of where I was, my apologies. So you can really use the this map to actually see patterns of where the higher and lower levels of energy burden are. There's an additional filter tool in the map as well that helps you narrow down and show which neighborhoods and communities actually have the highest level of burden. So for example, if you wanted to look at the topmost burden neighborhoods in the community, we have a filter bar in the GEM map that can actually help you filter out super high levels of energy burdened communities. So for example, I just moved it to that, and this is showing you about what the top 10% most burdened communities in Wayne County looks like, or what the top 20% most burdened communities in Wayne County looks like. And this is a way that you can actually help identify neighborhoods to target energy education, energy program, or resources if you really want to look at areas that are most heavily burdened. So you can actually, in fact, zoom in and really dig into where these high energy burden communities are. What do their energy burdens look like? 16, 18%, much higher and severe levels of energy burden here. So skipping through, because I know we're running short on time, I did want to also mention that GEM can be used to explore how energy burden relates to other equity indicators. For example, a lot of cities have climate commitments that center and prioritize racial equity. So GEM is actually able to show racial composition of a city and community by census tract as well. So there's a racial composition equity indicator. And we can look at the legend for this. So Black communities are in green, white communities are in teal. We have some Hispanic communities here, as well as some Asian communities as well. And then you can look at this as an overall in the city as far as where the predominant racial composition. And you can also look at this more one-dimensionally. So for example, if you wanted to look at where are Black communities in Detroit, where are white communities in Detroit, et cetera. So one of the things that you can do with race is actually layering it with energy burden. So you can actually take a look at how communities are impacted by multiple equity issues and select energy burden as a second equity indicator. So if you look at energy burden and Black populations in Detroit, you can see that there are definitely high levels of energy burden and high levels of in predominantly Black populations by this map. And what you're looking for is these areas in dark blue that show that there are both high levels of energy burden and high levels of Black population here. In contrast, if you look at where are there high levels of energy burden in predominantly white communities in Detroit, there are significant.
I think my phone just died. Can you?
Yeah, we got you back, Yo. Thank you.
So sorry. Technology has not been kind to me today. So we can actually look at equity data in other ways. So one other quick example before we switch into our small groups. What if our efforts to address climate and energy burden also address asthma, which is definitely a high priority issue in many communities of color. So one thing that you can do is layer asthma rates and energy burdens together. So if you look at asthma rates alone, we can take a look at it here. And we have this data for downtown Detroit. And you can see fairly high levels of asthma in some of these communities at 15%, 13%, which is significantly higher than around the national average, which is about 7%, whereas lower rates around here. But you can actually layer this with energy burden as well, making sure that we're just clicking electricity and gas. And this helps you focus on the communities that have both the highest rates of asthma and the highest rates of energy burden. So these kind of neighborhoods with high levels of both might be good targets for solutions that address both of those types of problems, like green and healthy home upgrades. So just one last thing to mention, you can actually dig deeper into the data behind GEM by downloading a spreadsheet of the data. For example, this will actually help download the information on asthma and energy burden when you click that download data tab. And you can actually download the maps as well to drop into presentations. So if you take a look at spreadsheet, it'll look like this, which will give you asthma rates, total energy burden, households, median income, and the census tract in which they're in. So you can do a really deep dive if you want. So I don't want to take up too much of your time so we can get into small groups, but we're going to break into small groups, and that way we can actually take a look at a city that you guys are interested in and discuss what you see with your colleagues. But before we do that, are there any quick questions about the technical usage of the map?
John and Olivia both had a question in the chat. You're welcome to come off of mute and just ask here in the room.
Sure, thanks. I just want to double check and make clear that you can only you can only use 2 layers at a time in the map, right? Okay.
Yes, that's right. Exactly right.
Later this summer, one of our monthly community practice conversations will be talking about the development of equity indices. So how we, might layer different things together to create one layer or one index to look at a few different things. So stay tuned for later this summer. We'll look at some cities that have done that. But so right now, the GEM tool, the 2. And John, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if the tool had a capability or could have a capability developed where you could kind of run some scenario analysis and essentially and see if the utility commission made this type of rate change, it would have this type of impact in terms of the number of households that are, in severe burden or whatever. That's my question.
So similar to some of the methods that Dr. Reames mentioned, we've used approaches with Energy Plus models to actually take the data in GEM and then recreate what the median home's hourly performance is. for each of the neighborhoods, and then identify individual energy efficiency measure interventions that would bring the energy burden down. We've done that with Atlanta, Birmingham, and Columbus so far. We're looking at maybe starting some stuff with Charlotte in a similar vein here. But yeah, I think that's right now it's a step beyond what we can do within GEM itself, but it's certainly something GEM is enabling us to do. Like, we're calling on the GEM data to make that analysis possible.
Thank you, Matt. I see we've got Dr. Erica Holloman Hill with us. You have a question, your hand is up. Please come off mute and ask your question. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Matt, yo, it's always great to see you all. Love all the great work here out of Atlanta. Question around the modeling and ground truthing of the information. Have you all done any ground truthing where we've actually gone into some of the most energy burden areas and done some energy audits to see how closely reality? And if not, is that a place where we as community partners can look to help strengthen assumptions that are going into the model?
Yeah, so we've done some ground truthing on the data that's in GEM with a few utilities where we were able to get the real data for them and compare that to the information that our math was providing. That's now what you see in the map, which gave us a decent sense that our baseline data was pretty good. Around the audit estimates, we're using standard building models for it, so we're not outside of what's industry standard, but the any efforts that actually then went and did the audits and we were able to compare to would definitely strengthen what's being done, because this is, statistical best estimates really is what we're producing. So real on the ground truth is going to strengthen a lot what we're able to say.
Excellent, thank you.
So here's what, sort of working with a little bit of a time pressure here. So I'm going to just adjust our plan just a little bit. We're going to go to breakout groups very briefly because we don't have that much time left, and we won't reconvene here in this big room. And our breakout groups are just for you to choose one of 4 cities that we can look at GEM a little more closely. And we have there are 2 things I want to give you before we go into that. One is this little instructions for how to walk through GEM, and put this link right here, and we'll send this out in an email to you all later. But these are the instructions for the small group exercise, and it's really like, hey, have a look at this for the city in GEM, have a look at this. Here's some questions to consider. What do you see in the map? Who might you want to talk to? What types of interventions? Just sort of a thought exercise of using GEM and what you already know. So we're going to have time to go into the groups, but I want to give you that little exercise, because this is something you can do on your own with your GEM login, or you can get other members of your team or your community or your household or whatever and walk through this stuff together. So wanted to let you know that. And then we also have this form, which I will, or Mina, can you pop in the chat the support form? Thank you so much. So here's also a form, because we knew time was going to be short in the small groups. And so what we wanted to do was to say, hey, we'd be happy to set up time with you to just get on a Zoom call and really dig into GEM in your city and help you use it for the things that you're curious about and the policies that you're designing. So here's a form that you can fill out and just say, I'd love more help, and this is my city. And if we notice that there are a couple people from the same city, we'll suggest that we all get together and walk through this. But we want to make sure that you get the support you need to be able to use GEM to learn the stuff you're trying to learn about your community and design the types of policies that you want. We're just running a little short on time. So I wanted to start with those 2 things, right? Play with that exercise, fill out the form. And what we're going to do now, it's a really short amount of time, but I did want to just go to the 4 rooms with the tool, and we'll kind of have a quick look or just kind of hear what questions people have about these cities. And if you want to set up time to dig deeper into any of these, and then we'll just leave the meeting from the small groups here in just several minutes. Okay, that sound all right to y'all? Sorry that we use so much time talking about these great questions. We have a little less for the interactive portion.
So you should get a little pop-up that allows you to pick which city you're interested in, which room you want to go into. We have Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, and San Jose in California.
So if you just hit click to join one of those rooms, one of us will be in there with our GEM tool open to that city and be able to walk through a couple of little questions that you might have about that.